Hey y'all. All right, part two. This one's been a little tricky. I've done a couple passes, looked at the script, a rough script, rough outline. The first time I got into the weeds, and then the second time I ended up getting into different weeds. I really want to make sure that it's really important to know the full extent of what sketching allows you to do, but really you'd be shocked at what you can do with squares and circles. So today what we're going to cover is we're going to cover the basics, so creating sketch parts, rectangles, lines, circles, and then we're going to cover something that if you've used AutoCAD before, you know, which is what I would call like auto snapping and alignment, and we'll cover that. We'll cover that here in a second. If you've done 2D, if you've done a lot of 2D work before, this is going to be, a lot of this is going to be very natural to you, but I don't know what y'all have done. So the first things first is units. Under document settings, you see you have units, and I can click on change active units, and I'm going to go ahead and set what units I want to work in. This is actually adjustable at all times. But if you have a sketch or you have a piece of something on your desk that you got your calipers out, you probably have the units that you're working with in your head. So it's best to set it before we really go any further. Okay. So Fusion is the 3D modeling software, right? But sketches are two-dimensional. So when we create sketch, we need to tell it where we want that sketch to go. Because I don't have anything in this tutorial part, I only have 3 planes, which would be, I have the XY plane, I have the XZ, and I have the YZ plane. That's all I got. I'm being specific because if I have an object here, I can also assign sketches to the faces of other objects, and we'll get into that later, but I think you can kind of see where this is going. It's just sketches all the way down, right? So let's go ahead and make a sketch on the base here, so XY, right? All right, so when I click that plane, there we go. Now I am sketching on this plane. Now I have a new tab up here, sketch, and I have a whole bunch of new commands. Okay, that's how you know that you're in a sketch, is you'll have the sketch tab available to you, and you'll also have the sketch palette available to you. I don't touch anything over here, so we're not going to look at it. But, what we are going to look at is our create functions. So I can make rectangles, circles, arcs, polygons. I say that because if you look, there are different ways of drawing rectangles, different ways of drawing circles. You will use these. So get yourself familiar with what a center rectangle is. Get yourself familiar with what a 2-point circle is. It's just clicking around, because you will use this, because everything that you do is going to be fundamentally based on sketches. So let's go ahead and start with a 2-point rectangle, which is this one here. So now I have the rectangle tool. As you can tell, my little cursor has a rectangle. And when I click, I can click anywhere. Now I'm drawing the rectangle, right? Now you'll notice that as I'm drawing it, I've got dimensions. Let's say I have a particular dimension that I want to hit. You don't have to try to line this up, exactly at 6 inches. That's silly. We could do one of two things. We can click and just create this object, or we can type, right? We could type in these boxes, right? We could put anything we want in there. And then to go to the next box, you can hit tab, right? So see, tab allows me to change the dimensions, right? Or let's start again, create 2-point rectangle, click. I can ignore that entirely. And now what I can do is I can go to create, and I can do sketch dimension. Or I can hit the D key. You will see me just magically appear with a dimension. That's because I'm hitting the D key. I'm not going to go through create, click, whatever. So we're going to do it for the tutorial. So sketch dimension, click. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to give this sketch some dimensions, right? Nobody cares about a rectangle that's 3.25738111729. We're going to call that 3.5, and we're going to hit the enter key. All right. And now we're going to define this, because remember, a rectangle, these two sides are the same. These two sides are the same. So hopefully we would know this side too. We're going to call that 6. All right. So I can move these dimensions around by clicking and dragging on them. This is only important because you'll end up with so many dimensions. You're trying to get them out of the freaking way. But what I can also do to these is double click on them, and I can change them, right? And I can change them to anything that I like. Okay. So this is the next part where if you've used AutoCAD before, you're gonna go, oh yeah, I know what he's talking about. But in AutoCAD, in CAD Autodesk products, I suppose, I've not really spent much time with SolidWorks. It's probably the same. But when I go to, let's use our next tool, which is our line tool. Say I want to draw a line. As you move your cursor around, you will notice that it kind of sticks to things. So if I move it here, what was that? That blue line it's auto locking to the midpoint of this bottom line here. You'll notice that it does that. This is sort of tricky to explain, but you notice that it's not sticking to this dimension here. Oh, now it is. Okay, this is not random. It's not. We can encourage this behavior. Let's say I want to lock to the center of this side here. You can encourage this behavior by highlighting, right? So I'm just hovering over. Oh, you see that? And I got the little triangle. That triangle means midpoint. We'll talk about constraints later. Oh, so now I got the midpoint, and now if I drag my mouse, I'm not clicking. I'm just hovering all over the place, and I'm locking to these things. It's really strange, I can imagine, but once you get used to it, it's so useful. Because before, think about it, I'd have to draw a line, right? That's 3.5 divided by 2, and that's my midpoint. No, hover your mouse over the line. You see the X, I'm snapping to the line. Again, I haven't clicked yet. I can do this all the way around. See that? I can snap to this edge, drag here. I can snap to the center. And I know I'm pushing on my 10-minute limit here, but I really, really want you guys to understand that this is the way you can draw, lines in reference to other lines, right? So let's say that I want to draw a line through the middle of this, right? I don't have to guess. Like I said, hover. Oh, there's my triangle. That's my midpoint. Click, and then I can come over here, and I can click on this other side, and boom. I've got a line directly through the middle. Now, you will notice that now I have divided this into 2 individual pieces that I can select. We'll get into that later. But let's say that I really just want this line as a reference because I'm trying to draw something else. If I click on this line and I hit the X key, that line is now a reference line. You see now I'm selecting the whole square. I promise with the next tutorial, we're going to do a little SD card holder as the first tutorial. And I know without context that this stuff is kind of tricky. But I really want you to understand. I really want you to understand that the tools snap to each other, right? And I want you to understand that you can take lines and you can make them reference lines, because that is going to be so important, especially since there are certain tools that will create reference lines as part of drawing, as part of creating that thing, right? So let's see what that looks like. If I do create, I do rectangle, I do a center point rectangle. Now I'm creating a rectangle, and I'm specifying the center of that rectangle. Let's say, you know what? Let's do it over here. I want to put that rectangle right in the middle of this darn rectangle. How do I know exactly where that center is? Well, remember I said that the triangle was midpoint, right? So I can hover along this line. I haven't clicked yet. I can hover along this line until I get to the middle. Boom, there's my triangle. There's my X. You'll notice it says place center point. Now I can click and I can draw my rectangle. Again, I can specify these dimensions. Let's do it a different way. Let's specify the dimensions by typing it before we've even created our object. So I'm going to make this 5, and I'm going to hit the tab key, and I'm going to make this 2.5. Okay. Now you'll notice when I hit enter, it automatically created these lines, as reference lines. That's what that means. So you're thinking, well, I don't want to create reference lines. Trust me, you do. We'll get into that later. So now you'll notice my highlightable areas are this one and this one. I'm at the 10-minute mark. There's so much more that I could go into modifying and circles, but I mean, circles is just the same thing. You create a circle, and then remember, when I hover in the middle of it, boom, I can lock. Let's say I want to draw and divide this circle, all right? See that? It's the same thing, right? Now, you'll notice as I'm drawing that there's all these little gray icons being created. I know I'm going over 10 minutes. I'm in only a video too, and I'm breaking my rule. But these are constraints. So it's automatically creating these constraints as you create your objects. Do you remember in geometry where you would have a triangle and you had to solve for the other side of the triangle? That's because this is doing the same thing for you. When we're creating objects, we're removing degrees of freedom, right? So we're saying, hey, this line is a line squiggle. What the heck does that mean? That means that it's horizontal vertical. Okay, so that line is always horizontal vertical. I didn't tell it that. It just told it that automatically. These constraints all come together to create lines and items and things that you can, you see how I can move this circle, but the lines stay vertical inside the circle, right? Now, that's because this is not constrained. I really don't want to go too deep into constraints, but that's because it's not constrained. You notice if I try that here, that doesn't happen. That's because these are constrained. That's why we want, anytime we have a dimension, we want to give it that dimension. And if we don't know a dimension, we want to hope that that dimension's going to show up, right? So let's define this. So let's hit D and let's click here. And now we're specifying the radius or the diameter there at 3, right? Same thing. I can move this around. And now I have, again, 2 selectable areas. Before we go into the next video, I know I've beat the 10-minute mark. Let's try to keep it under 15, I suppose. I'm going to give you guys a little preview. I'm going to hit Finish Sketch, and I'm going to hit my Home button. These sketches are now what we're going to turn into 3D objects, okay? The highlighted area of the sketch that's defined by the sketch is the area that we can turn into a 3D object. So let's go ahead and let's use our extrude tool, right? So this is a little sneak peek because the next video is going to be mostly, we're going to be making a little SD card holder. But you'll notice you're going to be like, man, all he does is spend time in the sketch and then it takes him 2 seconds to actually make the 3D model. Yeah, that's kind of how this goes. So now I'm going to extrude. Let's go ahead and extrude this. Okay, right? I could specify a height. So just like before, I'm specifying dimensions. I'm specifying what I want it to be. You'll notice my sketch disappeared. That's okay. Once we've created a sketch, they show up under the Sketches tab here. I can hide or view those sketches or anything really, you'll see this with bodies, using the little eye here. So let's turn that back on. Let's get our sketch back and let's go ahead and create, using the extrude tool, another body, right? Okay, same thing, right? Now I can turn the sketch off. The first time you create something from a sketch, it automatically hides itself, and that's where you would want to turn it on and off. I have 2 bodies here that I've created from a sketch. And now you notice under the bodies, there's my 2 bodies, right? All right. Now, let's say I want to put a hole in the center of this. What size hole? How big of a hole? Again, this is foreshadowing here. In the last few seconds, I'm going to show you guys this. Remember I said you could create a sketch on any plane, right? Remember I said that it automatically locks to the center? Remember I said that I can create reference lines? Remember I said that? Remember I said that I can define sketches after I put them, right? Remember I said that I can extrude? There we go. I think you see where this is going now. So on that note, we will we'll hang off, and then next time I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to make a little model and have some instructions here in front of me on my desk so I don't stumble through it. and we'll make a little SD card holder. So until then, you guys can play around with some sketches if you're really eager. Hopefully I should have the next tutorial done in the next couple days. But I think you understand that now the power of being able to make sketches on any surface that you might want to make a sketch, right? Oops, rectangle, center point rectangle. You'll know, you see how each tool, each create kind of has a thing. So play around with that extrude tool, play around with those sketches, and I think you'll pretty quickly learn how powerful just those two tools are. So next thing, we're going to make an SD card holder, and we'll dive in. We'll formalize some of the stuff that I've shown you guys here in the last 3 minutes. But if it clicked, it clicked. And the first thing you're going to do is you could probably draw your own. If it doesn't click, that's okay. We'll make sure that happens in the next tutorial. So thank you guys for paying attention, hopefully, and we'll see you soon.